In a green valley there was a horse named Atlas who bore the world on his broad shoulders. He was a draft horse, majestic and mighty, tasked with pulling the farmer's heavy wagon to market each week. His life was measured in weight, distance, and duty. He wore his harness like a second skin and prided himself on the steady, powerful rhythm of his pull. The creak of the wagon, the strain of the traces, the driver's occasional gee up. This was the symphony of his purpose. In the same farmhouse lived a cat named Nimbus. She was a cloud of gray fur, with eyes like liquid mercury. Her days were not measured, but meandered. She dedicated herself to the serious business of tracing the path of a sunbeam across the kitchen floor, of conducting silent conversations with sparrows from the windowsill, and of achieving the perfect coiled nap on the porch's warm planks. Atlas, plodding past the porch after a long haul, would see Nimbus blissfully asleep and feel a rumble of what he thought was disdain. What a small, useless life, he thought. No weight to pull, no distance to cover, no duty to fulfill. She contributes nothing. One brutal autumn day, the world on Atlas's shoulders became too heavy. The wagon was overladen, the path was mud-choked, and a hidden stone wrenched his leg. He stumbled, the wagon lurched, and a searing pain shot through his shoulder. He was led back to his stable, not with praise, but with pity and worry. The vet prescribed complete rest. For the first time in his conscious life, Atlas had no weight to pull. His purpose was locked away in the equipment shed. He stood in his stall, his great heart pounding with frustration instead of effort. The silence was deafening. The lack of strain felt not like peace, but like a void. On the third afternoon, a gray shadow slipped through the stable door. Nimbus padded in, her tail a gentle question mark. She didn't look at him with pity. She simply leapt onto the bottom half of the stable door, settled into a loaf-like shape, and began to purr. The sound was a tiny, rumbling engine in the quiet. Atlas huffed, ignoring her, but she returned the next day. And the next. She would sit, she would purr, and sometimes she would perform the intricate ritual of washing a single paw with profound focus. Bored and aching, Atlas began to watch her. He saw the way she truly saw the dust motes dancing in a sunbeam that sliced into his stall. He saw the absolute contentment in her still posture. There was no past haul to regret, no future load to dread. There was only the warm wood, the slice of light, the rhythm of her own breath. One day, driven by a loneliness he couldn't name, Atlas lowered his great head and sighed, a gust of warm air that ruffled Nimbus's fur. She didn't startle. She simply paused her washing, looked up, and blinked at him slowly. A cat's kiss. In that silent exchange, the lesson unfolded for Atlas. He had always defined strength as the capacity to bear weight. Nimbus embodied a different strength, the capacity to be utterly, completely present. Her duty was not to the farmer, but to the moment. She wasn't avoiding work. She was engaging in a different kind of sustenance, the nourishment of stillness, the deep listening of simply being. His forced rest was not an empty void. It was a field he had never learned to walk in. Nimbus, without a single word of instruction, was showing him how. Weeks later, when Atlas was healed and the harness was placed back on him, he felt the familiar strain in his muscles. But something had changed. As he leaned into the pull, he also remembered the feel of the sunbeam on his back in the stable. He remembered the sound of a purr in the quiet. He carried not just the weight of the wagon, but the memory of the sunbeam. The work was the same, but the horse was different. He was no longer just a beast of burden. He was a creature who also understood the cat's curriculum. Asterisk, the life lesson asterisk. We are often taught that value lies only in the weight we pull, in our visible labor and grand purposes. But there is a profound essential strength in the being, not just the doing. The cat is not lazy. She is a master of presence. The horse is not only noble for his labor, he becomes whole when he learns to stand still and feel the sun. Don't mistake gentle existence for emptiness. Sometimes the most vital work is to simply sit in the sunbeam, purr, and remind the struggler that the world is also made of light and rest and quiet, unburdened grace. Your worth is not only in what you carry, but also in what you are able to fully, peacefully inhabit. And so, Atlas returned to his work, but the rhythm of his world had two beats now, the strong, steady pull of the traces and the soft internal purr of contentment he carried within. He pulled the wagon to market with the same mighty strength, but his eyes now saw the wildflowers nodding by the roadside, and he felt the warmth of the sun on his coat as part of the journey, not just a distraction from it. Back in the stable yard, Nimbus continued her watch. She saw the subtle change in the gray horse, the less frantic chuffing after a haul, the way he would sometimes close his eyes and simply feel the wind before being led inside. A quiet understanding passed between them, a bridge built across the vast difference of their natures. The true test came with the first winter storm. A blizzard howled down from the mountains, painting the world in furious white. The farmer needed vital feed from a distant storage barn, a trip that was treacherous and desperate. Atlas was harnessed to the small, heavy sled. The wind screamed, the snow blinded, and the old pain in his shoulder whispered a warning. This was weight, distance, and duty of the most brutal kind. He leaned into the storm, muscles burning, every instinct shouting to panic, to resist, to buckle. The world had become pure, hostile force, and then, in his mind's eye, he saw not the blizzard, but a single, dust-filled sunbeam cutting across his stall. He heard not just the shrieking wind, but the memory of a tiny, rumbling purr, a sound of absolute, unshakable peace in the heart of stillness. He did not fight the storm. He pulled within it. He found, in the core of his being, the cat-like focus on the next single, small step. Not the whole terrible distance, just this hoof in the snow. Then the next. He was not just a horse pulling a sled. He was a creature inhabiting a moment of supreme effort with a strange borrowed calm. He reached the barn, delivered the feed, and returned, guided as much by that inner stillness as by the farmer's reins. Exhausted, steaming in his stall, he found Nimbus already there, a gray smudge on the familiar door. She didn't approach. She simply looked at him and gave one slow, deliberate blink. It was the highest praise. The farmer told the story for years. My mighty Atlas, a giant of patience and strength, who saved the herd in the great blizzard. He never mentioned the cat, of course. He didn't see the lesson that had been shared. But Atlas knew. He understood now that the cat's useless art was, in fact, a foundational wisdom. The strength to do must be built upon the ability to be. The capacity to withstand the storm is honed in the practice of appreciating the sunbeam. Nimbus wasn't shirking a different kind of life. She was a master of the inner landscape, and she had, in her silent way, become his most vital teacher. Years later, when Atlas was old and his pulling days were done, he spent his long afternoons in the pasture, Young, impatient colts would sometimes gallop up to the fence, snorting, "What did you do, old one? Tell us of the great pulls, the heavy loads." Atlas would look at them with eyes deep and calm. He'd swish his tail and say, "I learned to pull, but more importantly, I learned to pause." And he would turn his face to the sun, close his eyes, and in the warmth on his old bones hear the echo of a purr, a reminder that his greatest victory wasn't conquering the muddy hill or the blizzard's fury. It was discovering that his mighty heart was large enough to hold both the weight of the world and the weightless grace of a perfect quiet moment. And the lesson settles deep and true: do not live only in the harness or only in the sunbeam. A full life moves between the two. Honor the pull, but cherish the purr. For one gives you purpose, and the other gives you the peace to bear it. The cat and the horse are not opposites. They are the two breaths of a single contented soul, the effort and the ease. Master both,